There are certain smells that haunt you, not the good ones, like pine after rain or burnt marshmallows over a campfire. I'm talking about a smell that's followed me for 20 years, a smell that's thick, sweet, and just wrong. It came from a small, run-down cabin I stumbled upon deep in the woods of West Virginia when I was 11. And what I discovered inside wasn't a monster from some ghost story. It was so much worse, because it was real. That afternoon, my parents were having one of their quiet fights. You know the kind. The words are just whispers, but the silence between them is deafening. I couldn't stand it. I told them I was going to find firewood, but honestly, I just wanted to walk until I couldn't hear them anymore. I started following a deer trail, this thin little path that wound way deeper into the forest than I was ever allowed to go. The air got cooler and thicker, and the sunlight had trouble breaking through the trees. It felt like I'd stepped into another world, a world that was way older and didn't really care about me. After about 20 minutes, the trail just vanished. I knew I should have turned back. Panic is the last thing you want when you're a kid alone in the woods. But then I saw it, through some ferns, half-eaten by shrubs and shadows. I could just make out the dark shape of a roof. My heart started hammering in my chest. It was a mix of fear and this powerful, magnetic curiosity. An abandoned cabin. It was straight out of one of my adventure books. As I got closer, the first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't just the damp, rotting wood you'd expect. Underneath it all, there was something else. Something thick, sweet, and just wrong. It reminded me of this one time my dad found a dead animal under our porch, but this was so much heavier. The cabin itself was a total wreck. The porch sagged in the middle like its back was broken. The windows were just these dark, empty eyes. It looked like it had been abandoned for a century. But then I saw a small stack of rusty tin cans near the steps. Someone had been here. I hesitated, my hand clutching the strap of my backpack. Every part of me was screaming to run back the way I came. But the front door was open, just a crack, a dark little sliver. And right as I was watching, a gust of wind sighed through the trees and pushed the door open slowly with this long, groaning creak. It felt less like the wind and more like an invitation. And my 11-year-old brain, desperate for an adventure that wasn't about my parents' failing marriage, made a choice. I stepped onto the groaning porch. The air inside was so thick you could taste it. The dust and that awful sweet smell of decay. It took my eyes a second to adjust to the darkness. It was just a single, cluttered room. In the middle, there was a rough wooden table. And on the table, a plate with a fork and a can of what looked like cold beans with a patch of fuzzy green mold blooming on top. Someone had been here, recently. My eyes drifted to the walls. Tacked up with rusty nails were kids' drawings. The first couple were normal enough. A smiling sun, a lopsided house with smoke puffing out a chimney. But as I looked further down the wall, the drawings got wrong. Stick figures were scribbled over with angry, violent black crayon. One picture of a little girl holding a flower had this big reddish-brown smear across it. I tried to tell myself it was just mud or ketchup. And then I saw the mattress. It was shoved into a dark corner, stained and filthy. But I wasn't looking at the stains. I was looking at the bedposts. There were deep grooves, worn into the wood, darkened with grime. And coiled next to one of the posts was a short piece of stiff, dirty rope. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I was trying to make it all make sense, to come up with some innocent story, when my foot bumped something under the mattress. I knelt down. It was a small, spiral-bound notebook, like a diary. I flipped it open. The handwriting inside was big and loopy, like a little kid's. The first few pages were about birds and trees, but then the entries changed. They started talking about Daddy's games. One entry said, "Daddy says we have to play the quiet game all day. I don't like it. It's lonely." A few pages later, we played the tying game again. My wrists hurt. The last entry was from 2 weeks before. Just 5 words written in a shaky, desperate hand. You won't let me go. I dropped the diary like it was on fire. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. Every shadow in that room seemed to twist into something awful. That sweet, rotten smell wasn't just a smell anymore. It was the smell of the story in that diary. My mind started playing tricks on me. The whisper of wind outside sounded like a name being called. The drip of water from somewhere in the cabin sounded like footsteps. I scrambled backward away from the mattress, and my heel caught on a loose floorboard. It shifted with a loud crack, which startled me. A new wave of that horrible smell, stronger this time, billowed up from the dark gap. My blood went ice cold. Shaking, I knelt down and pulled the board away. It wasn't a basement, just a shallow crawl space full of damp earth. But something was in there. I saw a glint of metal. It was a rusty shackle bolted to a post that was driven into the ground, and right next to it was a small, dirty sneaker, the kind a little girl would wear. That was it. That was the moment the adventure died and pure animal terror took its place. I shoved the floorboard back, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. I had to get out. I spun around, my eyes locked on the rectangle of gray light in the doorway. But it wasn't empty anymore. There was a man standing there, his skinny frame filling the space, just a silhouette against the afternoon light. He was tall and thin, his hair a matted mess. His clothes were basically rags. He just stared, but his eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking through me. He didn't look mean. He just looked hollow and broken. He took a shuffling step into the room, and this low, rattling sound came from his chest. "You're back," he rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "My girl, you came back. I'm sorry. I was just trying to keep you safe." He raised a trembling, filthy hand and pointed toward a dark corner behind a stained sheet that was hanging from the ceiling. A corner I hadn't dared to look at. "I kept you safe," he whispered again, and a single tear cut a clean line through the grime on his cheek. "Just like I promised Daddy would." I didn't wait to see what was behind that sheet. Adrenaline hit me like a punch. I didn't scream, I just ran. I lunged for the small gap beside him, shoved past his frail body, and burst out onto the porch. I heard him call out something behind me, the sound of just pure, heartbreaking agony, but I didn't look back. I ran through those woods faster than I knew I ever could. Branches whipped at my face and arms, but I didn't even feel them. The half-mile back to the campsite felt like 100. I finally burst into the clearing, sobbing, gasping for air. My parents' quiet fight was over in an instant as they rushed over to me. I tried to tell them what had happened, but it all came out as a jumbled, hysterical mess about a smelly cabin, a sad, scary man, and a little girl's diary. My dad and 2 other guys from a campsite nearby went to go look for it. They found the trail that I had followed, but they just said it ended in a bunch of thorns. There was no cabin, they said. They told me I'd gotten lost and scared, and that the woods can play tricks on your mind. That I must have had a bad dream or something, but I knew what I saw. I never told them about the ropes, or the shackle, or the broken man who thought I was his daughter. For 20 years, I've lived with what I found in that cabin. It wasn't a ghost or a monster. It was just the quiet, suffocating horror of a human life gone terribly wrong. The most terrifying discovery I ever made was that you don't need ghosts to visit hell. Sometimes all it takes is a cabin in the woods.